Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Distributed Republic webcast. It's great to be joining with you all today before Christmas. This is our 15th webcast of the year, so really excited to kind of wrap it up. Um, want to be able to kind of say, like this session today, normally I would go in with guests and we would talk about these kind of topics, but what I've noticed from delivering workshops throughout the whole of this year with people across all sorts of the professional landscape is there's some frequently asked questions that keep coming up. Someone goes, where do I go to find these answers? And I wanted to be able to produce something today that I thought was going to be useful for you to be able to look for those answers around AI essentials. So, for those of you who haven't joined us before, welcome to the Distributed Republic webcast. This webcast explores the impact of decentralization, Web3, the metaverse, and AI on our social, economic, and political systems. Our mission is to ensure that communities that can benefit the most from the inception of new technologies have the access to resources, education, and expertise to thrive in a digital world. Now, for today's workshop, normally, as I said, it's a bit of a discussion format, but today it's just going to be me talking. But I am going to try and do two things that we do when we do this webcast, which is to minimize the jargon and to keep the answers as short as possible. I think we've got about 19 questions that I've lined up for today, and that's because there's a lot of things that I want to be able to cover, but I'm going to keep those answers short. I'm going to make sure that they are straightforward and that they are easy to understand. However, you can't always get away from technological jargon, which is why I've put a terminology guide produced by our friends at Metashapers. And it has a lot of all the common use terminology related to AI and Web3. There's two guides on there. So if you want to be able to jump to my Stan store, which is stan.store/Jamie Bykov-Brett, and you'll be able to see the links to be able to download those terminology guides. So if you hear something today and you're like, I don't know what that means. I've not heard that before. That's not come up before. Then this is a great way to be able to start to look at understanding some of those terminologies a bit better. So the other thing I'd like for you to be able to do is to add any questions that you might have into the comments. This is really useful. We're going to come through at the end of the workshop today to be able to answer any questions. I'll hang around afterwards to make sure that we cover every single one of them. But you'll also see if you're on LinkedIn in the comment section, you can see all of the questions that we've got coming up today. So hopefully that will cover a lot of the questions that you're looking to ask. So without further ado, with all setup done, let's get into our webcast for today, Unlocking AI Secrets, Essential Insights for Educators, Parents, and Students. So, question number one. Probably one that I hear most frequently, particularly from parents, is how does AI impact a child's education and future career? I think this is because when you look at the state of play when it comes to AI at the moment, lots of people are concerned about how AI is going to change the job landscape. And we can see that for lots of different reasons. When you look at Goldman Sachs, they reckon that over 300 million jobs are at risk of displacement or substituting in some form with AI and automation in some kind of way within the next few years, by 2030. That's 300 million jobs. It's about 25% of the global workforce. Obviously, that sounds very scary, and that changes our dynamics from a workplace, the way that we interact in the workplace. So, how does it impact your child's education? Well, first of all, I think the easiest thing that we need to be able to understand, or one of the things that's most important to be able to understand, is that we are moving from an industrial economy to a digital economy. So, what does that mean? An industrial economy is what we've had since the Industrial Revolution. It's all been around essentially treating people quite like machines. People have facilitated the role that is kind of being facilitated by machines moving forward, in the sense that what we used to be able to do is produce, and we would go into work, produce the output that we need to be able to do, and that was enough to be able to sustain the economy. When we're looking at a digital economy, we're looking at a real change in the way that people participate in that economy, because a lot of things that used to be done by people can now be done by what we consider to be, or are frequently called, artificial intelligence. Now, the way that when I'm talking to employers, when I'm talking to organizations about what our current AI capabilities are, and they say, how do we implement AI in our organization? I say, if it's something that's at the level of an intern, if it's something that's repetitive, or if it's something that involves a lot of text, the likelihood is that we will be able to get an AI or automation to be able to complete that task. Now, that's a lot of entry level roles. And that means that the way that we're going to participate and the roles that are going to be available for young people coming in are going to be very different than what they have looked within the Industrial Revolution. And I want to be able to take that Industrial Revolution and kind of give it a bit of context. When we're moving from the pre-industrialized era to the Industrial Revolution, 80% of industrial jobs, 80% of the jobs before the Industrial Revolution were agriculture based. Within the space of 50 years, that had gone down to 20% of all jobs being agricultural related. And in order to be able to do that, we had to change the shape of the economy, we had to change our education, we had to change the way of working in order to be able to support people from that agricultural revolution into the industrial revolution. Now we need to be able to look at doing the same thing. And that means not just skilling for a digital workforce, but also a change in mindset. And this is something that I often see being left out is we need to change the way that we think to be able to participate in a digital economy as well. So that's just some of the way that AI is going to impact children's education, but we'll unpick that a little bit further as we go on. Next question is, how can the digital divide in AI resource availability be addressed? I think this is a big challenge that we see. So when we look at the digital divide, we're essentially talking about the access to and use of innovative technologies. And every time the power of digital increases, the capabilities of those who are able to use it and those who aren't widens. And the gap between their capabilities to use this technology widens significantly. What also significantly widens is the the level of participation that someone is able to have within that space. So what happens is our inequality also widens, and when it combines with digital inequality, what happens is we see that that can combine with pre-existing inequalities to widen those inequalities as well. So what can we do to help reduce some of those barriers to participation and support people within that digital divide? But one of the things we need to do is make sure that there is access to and education around innovative technologies, particularly relating to AI. So that means whether it's a case of schools upskilling teachers on how to be able to use AI, whether it's a case of making sure that digital technologies are available, are affordable, and accessible to all, and making sure that we're able to support people whose digital literacy skills might not be at the same level as other people to be able to develop those skills. I see this quite a lot when I'm talking to millennial peers at the moment, which is a lot of them going, you know what, I don't need to know about AI. My digital skills, I'm already technophobic. I don't really want to be able to participate even more with digital technology. And I go, I want you to think about your grandparents' generation and those grandparents who were able to keep up with digital technology and are capable of buying things on Amazon and being able to use online banking and stuff like that, versus those who've experienced marginalization because they are not able to use those digital technologies. And when we're looking at things like Web3, the metaverse, and AI, the inability to use those technologies will create further marginalization. So we need to think about how can we make sure that those are not barriers to participation. And that might be in the way that they're designed. It might be through having alternative ways of being able to participate. It might be through education to bring everyone up to speed. But whatever it is we need to be able to do, we need to make sure that those resources are made widely available and we design with the margins in mind. Best thing that I ever heard was, if you design with the extreme in mind, you benefit the mean population. And we should always be looking for those who outliers and being able to support them to be able to come into the fold, because the likelihood is an accommodation that you make for somebody on the outliers will also benefit the majority of people as well. And that means you don't just design things for ability, but you also design them for preferences. So next question. What can be done about concerns regarding increasing socioeconomic disparities in AI? There's a really interesting formula by Thomas Piketty, which is that the current rate of the economy grows about 3% every year, yet the return on investment is about 6 to 12% every year, which means the growth of the economy is significantly less than the rate of than the return on investment. And when that happens, what you see is that means that the money is being sucked from the economy into the pockets of those who have the capabilities of being able to invest. Now, that obviously leads to our economic systems being inherently unequal. And as we continue to move forward on this journey, what we're seeing is those economic disparities are getting wider and wider. Now, one thing that I'm a huge advocate for is you can't just implement technology like AI that has the power to completely change and shift the workforce without also thinking about the economic models that underpin that society. Now, let's take a bit of a thought experiment with that. If we imagine a world where AI underpins a lot of our economy and our contributions as people are not as widely needed to be able to participate within that economy, but you still have the same economic models that were built for the industrial era, what you're going to be able to have is a lot of people are going to experience marginalization because they're not able to work as much or they're not able to work as for the same amount that they were before. And this is going to be mainly impacting a lot of white collar jobs, a lot of jobs that are digital, that are desk based, because those are the things that it's easiest to be able to implement AI with. So, one thing we have to think about is how do we change those economic models to continue to support everyone to be able to participate? Now, I'm a big fan of being able to look at things like universal basic income, universal basic services, resource based economies, which essentially ensure that everybody has access to basic needs. Now, this is going to be increasingly relevant when we're participating within a digital world because, as I said, our work participations might not be as needed. And also, that means that you're already creating a society in a world that is able to accommodate people whether they are participating or not, and that's kind of what you're going to have if AI underpins a lot of the society that we live in. Next one, how can educators keep pace with a rapid evolving AI technology? And boy, do I feel for you teachers, particularly within this world that we're going through at the moment. And our education system was designed to help people participate in the industrial world. It was designed to prepare them for that industrial world. And now we're trying to prepare young people for a world that is uncertain, where it's unclear, where we're not 100% on all of the impacts that it's going to have for people being able to participate within that world. And how do we educate people for the unknown? And this is where I think it comes very much down to thinking about people's mindset as much as it is their capability and skills. Because one thing that we should be able to educate for is to be able to deal with uncertainty, is to be able to adapt to changing situations, to be able to be creative and innovative within those situations. But we'll come on to that in a bit. But as for educators, how do they keep up to date with technological advancements? My recommendation is don't get bogged it down with every update of technological insight. I do this every single day, but that's because that's what my job is. And it's about learning all of those updates. However, you don't need to know every single update that happens because the rapid change of AI is happening so fast that literally what was true 6 months ago is not necessarily true today. If we look at this time last year, the biggest AI model was an AI model called Bloom, and it was open source, and it probably was a bit like ChatGPT's clunky AI cousin, but it was usable and it was used by many people. Now that's completely shifted within the space of 18 months, and even businesses that were set up in response to the implementation of ChatGPT within the first 6 months of the year, because of updates, because of the evolution of applications and AI software and stuff like that, a lot of them have been wiped out within the space of a year because that's how quickly these updates have happened. So if you want to be able to keep up to date with it, one of the recommendations that I would have is some really targeted reading. Don't have an information light diet in many ways, but if you were looking for one place to be able to start, it would be Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, a fantastic author who looks at the future of human evolution based on our technological capabilities. And one of the reasons I'd recommend this book is because it talks about the underpinning principles of some of our technological development rather than the technological capabilities themselves. There's a great quote by Edward O. Wilson, which is, "We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology." And the problem is, when we've got things like godlike technology, is we haven't necessarily earned the wisdom to be able to utilize it yet. And our institutions, being medieval institutions, often haven't came up with the regulation for it. The technology evolves quicker than our institutions are able to regulate it for it. And that also goes for schools as well. The technological development that we're seeing is far greater than we're able to educate and shift our education system for that participation. So it's just something to be aware of. How can parents navigate safety and privacy concerns with their children's use of AI? One thing that we quite often do is that we will give up our privacy or for convenience. We won't check over what it means to be able to go through the terms and conditions of something because we want to be able to have something and we want to be able to have it now. The best recommendation that I can give is just get young people to be able to think about what they are leaving online, because every time they use an application, it might be collecting data in some way. You can't necessarily navigate for the fact that data is exchanged for access to services, but what you can do is get people to think about how they're utilizing their data in a meaningful way, and how young people can protect themselves from those safety and privacy concerns. And the biggest piece of advice that I could give is, don't put anything online that you think would put you in any particular vulnerable situation. That includes if you're using an AI application. Anything that you put up there might be used to train an AI model that could have an impact. But often you can also find that there's settings on these. Once again, if I was to take ChatGPT as an example, where you can turn on settings for privacy. So you can go, I want this data to be able to train the model, or I don't want it to be able to train the model. But it's also something that we shouldn't necessarily get overly scared about. There can be a cautiousness to it because it's the unknown and we're not sure how that data is being utilized. But getting people to be aware of how what they're sharing online is always a very useful way to be able to go about it. Remember, when something's put online, the likelihood is it might not be something that you'll be able to get back. And that's the way that I would talk to young people about what they're putting online, is to go, be aware that once you do so, it might be something that's out of your control. How can AI be effectively integrated into the existing curricula? I think it's really important that we educate for AI and we don't try to do what we did when we had calculators implemented into schools. This is the first thing we're going, oh my God, they should never use calculators. It's going to stop people from participating. It's going to stop people from learning. They won't learn these times tables. Um, what we need to be able to do is go, how can you look at the subjects that are there and how can they be enhanced by AI? So utilize it as part of your session plans. Use it as a way to get people to think about the research they're doing, get it to be able to look from a testing what they've come up with an AI perspective versus what they've come up from their own research perspective. Utilize it in a way that's meaningful and also utilize it in a way that helps tailor the education for the individual. And this is where AI has an amazing advantage, is you can teach an AI on someone. You can give them information that might be useful. You could give them parameters to be able to work in. It's really useful to be able to do in those situations is to then go, right, I'll give you an example. Teach this person about World War II based on their interests in gymnastics, okay, or terminology that they might find about it. So you can take things that people are passionate about and you can use it to be able to apply it to the subjects that you're talking of, which gives a much more tailored education to the individual. How can parents teach the importance of emotional intelligence in a tech-driven world? So, when we're looking at emotional intelligence, I am a big believer that the most valuable skills that you can have in a digital economy are creativity, emotional intelligence, and communication. And that might surprise people when they're thinking about a digital space. But the reason that these are the most valuable skills is they are things that are very difficult to be able to teach AIs, machines, algorithms to be able to do. You have to think about what separates somebody in a digital economy is their capability to use things that wouldn't be better used by a machine. In fact, the industrial economy taught us how to machine. We turn people into algorithms, we turn them into machines, because that's what we needed to be able to sustain that economy. Now, the thing that's going to be most valuable within a digital economy is the things that make you inherently human. So things that are difficult for machines to be able to do. I think the importance of it means that, once again, if I go back to those three questions, can it be done by an intern? Is it repetitive? And does it involve a lot of text? What we want to be able to go is that, well, those skills are not necessarily the skills that are going to support young people within those digital economy, but the capability to communicate is still really valuable when we work with AIs. So, for example, if I send an email to someone and it's a duff email, it just has very little information. Hey, can you do this for me? But it doesn't really outline what it is. The likelihood is the person who received that email will come back to me, and I probably won't have what I want, what I imagined when I sent that email, because I haven't given them enough information, haven't given them enough time, haven't given them enough thoughts, haven't told them how I want it to be able to be done. The same is exactly true when we interact with particularly generative text AIs, is that if we leave our text to be vague and we don't clarify what we want, then the likelihood is we're going to get a vague answer as well, which means that those communication skills that are so valuable within an industrial economy are also really valuable within a digital economy. So we have to think about those interactions that we have, and also how young people are going to participate with AI and how that's going to shape and warp some sense of reality. For example, AI companionship in July had overtaken AI content creation in the most used applications for AI. And that's really interesting, because that means that we're starting to see this evolution of people interacting with AIs to facilitate human needs that would previously needed to be done by communication with people. And what does that mean for people who are growing up in this digital era? I'll give you a really good example is, if we think about what Photoshop did for people's sense of body image, imagine what AI companionship is going to do for people's sense of relationships. So we need to think about how we can help educate young people around the risks, the challenges of AI, and the place that AI takes within the world that they participate in. And a lot of that is going to need to unpick what it means to be able to interact and feel things within these digital spaces. How can ethical considerations of AI be taught to students? Well, one thing that I would like to be able to work through is a really simple framework and it's unfortunately not necessarily the best name, but it's called the FAT framework, which stands for fairness, accountability, transparency. This is a really useful framework to be able to look at with AI, and how AI is being able to be used through those lenses that, once again, are a bit more human. They're a bit more holistic in our approach rather than just the technological capabilities. So, highly recommend, if you want to be able to look at how we can educate people on the ethical considerations, that framework is a great place to be able to start to get people to understand how AIs are being used and what considerations that we have to be able to take when using them. What strategies can help with dealing with the sense of overwhelmed by these AI advancements? I think I spoke about this a little bit before when we were talking to teachers, but more generally, is it's not a problem to have information light. Target the information that you're having. This is going to sound dreadful for someone who generates most of their business through online sources, but I have my news feeds blocked on all of my computers, so I have to actively choose to be able to do it. There's a Google Chrome extension called Newsfeed Eradicator. Now, social media can be a fantastic tool, but we also need to be able to pick and choose how we're absorbing all of that information and when we want to absorb all of that information. So having things in place that you can use to just be able to make sure that you're actively choosing to participate rather than absorbing everything that comes your way is really useful for being able to stop that sense of overwhelmness and keep that sense of control within yourself when participating digitally and learning about all of these updates from an AI perspective. Also, there's a lot of people who have a lot of hype and a lot of hype chat. I see it within community groups and participation in lots of spaces, which can make people feel that like they're behind the curve. But I can guarantee you that a lot of people are not utilizing these or not actively participating in the way that they might describe themselves as doing so. There's a lot of great thinkers out there and idea generators, and I'm all for that. but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has this amazing technical capability that you don't have. And most people are still learning, they're still figuring out the best ways of being able to utilize these systems. So don't worry if you feel behind. There needs to be more than just you having to take an active role to be able to participate, as well as having the structural and infrastructure around what you need to be able to learn to be able to participate in an AI digital economy. So just don't panic from that perspective. What opportunities exist for gaining practical experience with AI tools? I mean, the biggest experience that you can find is going out there and utilizing it. Don't feel that you have to have done lots of courses and have a university education and all of this kind of stuff to be able to go and utilize these things. People are learning things every single day about these tools. The best way to be able to go and do that is to just start having a play, do something creative, do something fun. Don't get held back by the technological phobia that we have, where we go, oh, it didn't work on the first time, so I don't know how it's going to be able to work. That persistence and that ability to continue to engineer is really, really important. So, for example, when we look at prompt engineering, which is our interactions with AI and how we can design a good prompt for a text generative AI, that is an iterative process. It's not about getting it all right on the first time. And I know we want things to work immediately and we want them to work perfectly straight away, but that's often not the case when we're participating. So don't be afraid if things don't work the right or the way that you would expect them to the first time. Give yourself time to be able to learn, time to be able to make mistakes, and realize that it's only through that iterative process that anybody gets practical experience when it comes from an AI perspective. You can also look at being able to use good tools. If you are looking for education on the way that AI works or foundational concepts, then look at things like Google Garage, Amazon Web Services. They have free courses on how AI works, and it's a great place to give yourself a foundation, a starting block of knowledge in order to give you the confidence to go and participate. Um, So let's see, just because I'm aware of time, I want to go and see if we've got any questions. There's plenty else that I have, but I'm going to make sure that we go through what other people have got as well. So let's go for we've got one from Ganesh. What are the educational benefits of incorporating AI for children? Some of the educational benefits is around that tailored education. So being able to make sure that when we're designing our educational bits, normally what we have is we design for that median population, our neurotypical, our middle 50 to 75% of people. And that means that we leave a lot of people out of being able to be educated in a way that's going to be meaningful to them. One thing that we can do with AI, and we'll see it as our continued AI capabilities are coming, is that we can start to look at, let's say we're looking at a video, and that video has been designed, for that 75%, your middle of the run in your classroom. Now, what we could then do is utilize things like AI to be able to change the wording, change the content, change the understanding, make it more engaging, potentially even redesign it with different neurodiversities in mind, in order to be able to support those who might have not previously understood it through the middle of the road content, but from instead being able to go, well, I've tailored this for the individual. And I think that's the biggest educational benefit that we'll be able to see. I also think that AI, from a capability perspective, gives us, it takes us 80% of the way there. And I think that that's what I mean by 80% of the way there is when we're doing a task with AI capabilities and implementing AI, what we generally find is that it makes things so it's so much quicker to be able to do things. That takes us to probably the 80% mark, but that doesn't leave the 20% mark that needs human intervention, needs human oversight to be able to ensure that it's fit for purpose. I think that this is one of the things we'll see from an education perspective, is being able to help students get to the right answer quickly, but also how can they be critical about what's been produced from an AI perspective. And that is really a lot of our benefits from an education perspective. Cool. So there was a question here around some of the books that are recommended. If you check in the comments, what I've done is I've added a recommended reading list already in there. So if you want to be able to check that out, yeah. It has a list of AI books that you might want to be able to read, also ones around mindsets for digital economies that I hopefully think are going to be really useful to get you started. Great. And let's go back to some of our other questions because we've got 3 minutes to be able to go, but I will stick around afterwards if anyone has any extra questions that they'd like to be able to add. Um, how can cultural perspectives, let me say that again, but say it right. How can cultural perspectives, this is the point. I had a COVID the week before, and what I can feel is in my throat now. So, how should cultural perspectives and biases in AI be addressed? This is a really important question. So AI is a very centralized source. And what we generally tend to find is we should look at AI as a bit of a mirror. It reflects to us what we put into it. So the data that's trained on, which means that AI quite often perpetuates societal norms and perspectives. That has to be something that we have to mitigate against when using AI. So I'll give you a good example. If I asked an AI, generative AI bot to be able to go, I would like you to write me a list of the 10 greatest philosophers over the last 50 years. The likelihood is, well, let's say 100 years. Over that 100 years, the likelihood is they would probably be white, middle class men, because they have had greater exposure within the timeframes that we're talking about. And therefore, a lot of other voices would have been marginalized within that space and time, which means when it looks at it, it's going to statistically go, well, I have the most content of these people, this group of people, this subset of society, which means that's the list that I'm going to be able to produce. However, what we want to be able to do is to be able to mitigate against that. So if I said to a generative AI bot and said, I'd like you to produce a list of the 10 philosophers from the last 100 years, but I want it to be diverse in terms of race, gender, and class, then the likelihood is I'm going to get a much better output from that AI. So we have to think about the data that AI is being trained on, how it's being utilized, and how we can mitigate against it continuing to potentially perpetuate damaging societal norms and perspectives. But it's definitely something that we can look at being able to do from a much wider perspective. We've seen this with things like AI algorithms that are trained on historical policing data, perpetuating potentially racist stereotypes, perpetuating damaging arrest records, and continuing to do that because that's the data it's been trained on. So we really have to be comfortable participating in that conversation that says we want to be able to know how this data is sourced, what kind of cleaning's been done on it, because if it's going to be a mirror of us, we need it to be potentially a mirror that we've shined ourselves. Excuse the metaphor, but instead of having it as a mirror that is something that reflects us exactly as we are from a societal perspective right now, maybe it needs to be able to reflect us in a slightly better way. And that means that us being cautious and careful about the data that we use to be able to train our AI systems. Um, let's go. What are the ways to find the balance between human interaction and AI reliance? I've said it a few times, and I think it's really important, is understanding that the most valuable skill that you can have in a digital economy is your capability to be human, to do things that AIs can't do. And one of the things that's always made me optimistic about the future of our digital economies is if you ask somebody what they would do if money wasn't an issue, if money wasn't a consideration, the likelihood is they would say things around volunteering, around spending time with family, around helping communities, around social good causes. Like, I think that says more about what it means to be human than it does anything else. And hopefully, what we want to see within our AI implementation within society is that those if AI is giving us more time, if AI is underpinning a lot of society, then that should give us more time to be able to focus on the things that are meaningful to both us and a societal perspective. And I think that is something that we often miss within this discussion is how do we want to change the world if the capability to participate in a working perspective, particularly within those jobs that are repetitive, that are the entry level are going to disappear or be reformed in some kind of way. what do we want to be able to do to have people spend their time in a way that's going to be both meaningful to them and meaningful to the world. And I think that is the most important thing to be able to look at, is that pursuit of meaning, and also what it means to be human in a digital world. Don't get hung up on some of the skills that we might have valued within the industrial era, which was our ability to be machine-like. Machines are going to machine better than people, so people need to people better than machines. And we see this all the time when we look at AI development and capabilities. Is our screen time for children on average is between 6 to 9 hours within the teenage years, and that is a huge, and that's not including educational screen time. And already we've used technology to kind of facilitate for the fact that we're having to do some more of that machine-like drudgery, because we need to work longer hours, because we need to do this, because we need to do that. And therefore technology has taken over that role of facilitating that young people interaction. And actually, hopefully, as we move into a digital economy, it should be about being able to move away from a reliance on machines for doing things that should really be done by people, and spend more time being able to do it on peopling better. So hopefully that will find a better balance as we move forward. So that is the end of today's webcast. Thank you so much for your participation, for your comments. We didn't have necessarily lots of questions, but we have a lot of very nice comments in our space. So thank you so much for letting us know, being able to give that feedback, and for joining us. And if you're curious about this kind of things, I'd recommend being able to go to our community, which is called Distributed Republic. Go to www.distributedrepublic.xyz. We help people learn more about Web3, the Metaverse, and AI, and other digital innovative technologies. It's a free to join community. We've got a bunch of resources on there. And also you can follow us at Distributed Rep. And if you're curious about this, you want to be able to learn more, you want support for your organization, you'd like to be able to talk to me a little bit more about how AI can be able to support your school, your as a parents or community groups, then do reach out to me. I'm at Jamie Bykov-Brett. Thank you so much for your time, energy. I can still see lovely comments coming through, so thank you so much for that. And we look forward to catching you at the next webcast. Have a fantastic end of 2023, and I look forward to seeing you all in 2024.